Uh, Guys, I am sopping wet here. I'm out here on Dagobah where it's rainy and swampy and just cold and wet. Hopefully you are not as cold as wet as I am here on Dagobah, but I am about to go into Yoda's hut back here, and he's got a computer hooked up to Google, and I'm going to give you some quick information about Google spreadsheets and how to make some really pretty graphs. And I'm going to be using a data table from Google's online dice roll calculator thing. So anyway, I'm going to go to the hut, and I'll see you there in a second. To get the data for the table that I used, I Googled roll a die and used Google's dice rolling tool to come up with a set of 10 numbers that had two pieces of data each, so that when we look at our table, we've got a table with number of occurrences and then two different values for each occurrence. So we've got our data from our 10 dice rolling or die rolling trials. If I wanted to add more data, I would choose the cell that I was going to add the data to and click on it, and then it becomes highlighted. You'll notice that there's a column A and a column B. You can't rename these columns, unfortunately, but if you wanted to put a header on the column, you would click on the row that you want that column, that header to be in. And if you choose insert, choose row above, you could write die 1 and die 2 to keep those trial numbers separate. One thing that I like to do when I'm working in a spreadsheet is make my columns a little bit more adjusted to fit the size of the text inside. So rather than being super spaced out, the default size, if I've got data or information that's very short, I like to make those columns be a little bit shorter as well. So from here, after you've got your data entered in, and I'm going to delete that last row because that was not from my dice rolling trial. Once you've got your data entered in, you're going to highlight all of the data that you want to include on your graph, and you can choose to include the header or not. It doesn't really matter. It just makes the step of labeling your axes come at a different time. So I usually include the header, and then I'm going to choose to insert a chart, and that brings up a menu. All right, so now I've added my last trial that I needed to have 10 trials for my data. So what I'm going to do now is highlight the 3 columns, die 1, die 2, and trial, and then all of my data. I'm again going to go up to insert and choose chart. That chart menu then is going to pop up, and you'll see now that there's some weird stuff going on. The trial data is getting its own column or its own label here and its own dots, and die 2 has dots and die 1 is a line. So that's weird. But we can fix all of that by using the setup area of our chart. So before we do any setting up of the chart, what's important to do is to look at the types of charts and see which one is going to be the one that best fits our data. So the suggested we have from Google Sheets are a scatter chart, a line chart, and here's what a line chart would look like, a bar chart, and a column chart. So again, we really can't get a sense of which kind of chart we want until after we've had a look at the data. And what we want to see is that trial 1 results in these types of rolls, trial 2, these types, so on and so forth. So I think that I'm going to stick with this one with the column chart, and now I can do some editing. So if my x-axis is along the bottom, I want to see the trials. I want to see those 10 trials along the bottom. So now my bottom line, my x-axis of my chart, is each of those 10 trials. And when we are looking at the vertical axis or the series, what we can do is die 1 and change that from trial to die 2. And now we can see that each dice roll, the roll of the dice, shows per trial what those results were. And then we can do some further analysis with that if we want to. So before I leave the bar chart, there's a couple more things that I want to show you in terms of what you can do with it. Right now it says die 2 and trial, which isn't really a great title for a chart. So I can double click inside that text box, and then over on the right hand side my editor will show up, and I can change the text, and let's call it rolling the dice. And I can change font, color, blah, blah, blah. Looking at the series, this is looking at that data here on the left side of where your chart is. And you can kind of play around with all of these other pieces under the customization. You may have data that might not be the best for a bar chart. You might want to see a line chart or a pie chart or something else. Depends on what your data is and how you want to display that. That will dictate what kind of chart you want to use. But remember that there are the suggested tables that Google suggests based on the data that you've input, but you can scroll down and look at other types of tables as well. And all you need to do to see what that table would look like with your data, with the labels that you chose for your bar chart, is to just click on that chart. Now this is showing the trial numbers and a percentage of what types of roles were happening on each trial number. So if I wanted this pie chart to show percentages of roles, I would need to change either my label or my value, maybe use different selections here in these boxes, but it's going to change every time you put data in. So play around with it. The best way that I found to learn these tools is to start with an already existing table and already existing graph and manipulate the tools inside the setup and the customization to have the table that I'm being shown match the table on my computer and the graph that I'm being shown match the graph on my computer as well. So it's more of a trial and error process for a lot of this. Well, I've dried off just enough for it to be time for me to go back outside in the rain again. Hooray. But before I go, I hope that you learned a little bit about how to input data and how to make that data display in a graph that shows what you want it to show. I am happy to take suggestions for other types of videos you'd like me to make. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you later.